Portaging. On many a canoe trip, the portage is this necessary thing that we must endure in order to get to where we want to go. It's the point in the route where we've paddled as far as Mother Nature allows. Maybe the lake or river has wandered down into a shallow trickle. Perhaps it's a man-made dam or the dangerous drop-off of a waterfall. It could be an angry and impassable stretch of rapids.
No, come. Come. Little spike there.
Whatever it is that happens to be blocking the flow of our path, this is the point in our journey where we must get out of the boat. This is when we must gather up all of our belongings, all of our baggage, including the canoe, and carry everything through to the other side.
Ready? Let's go, puppers.
Along the way, it's not always easy. Sometimes there are big elevation changes, uphill rocky climbs, steep slopes to clamber down. While shouldering packs full of gear and the canoe, we often find ourselves trudging through mucky, swampy bits, balancing across rocks and logs, trying to ignore bug bites, the heat, and the pain.
Keep going.
Aching for the other side, for this torturous task to be over, for that first glimpse of glittering water.
I made it.
Some of the absolute best canoe trips have several portages, depending on personal opinion, of course. The thing is, the more portages you take, the farther into the backcountry you will get, the farther into the wilderness and away from civilization. And this is where we find ourselves immersed in a stunningly beautiful landscape, long forgotten by our modern world. With their obstacles and triumphs, these backcountry canoe trips are not only an escape, they're a metaphor for life. In June of 2022, I took a trip that ended up being a sort of portage in itself, and this was the canoe trip that changed the rest of my life. As a divorced single mom in my late 30s, I was rebuilding a career after being at home with the kids for about a decade, facing the challenges of living in a century home in need of renovations. And navigating the dating scene seemed like the biggest, steepest portage of all. We met on Tinder, as a lot of people do these days, but this interaction was different. In those first messages, we talked about how I was an artist and about his work as a metal fabricator and welder. We connected through similar views on the artistic process. His medium was metal, and the key was listening to which way the material wanted to bend. Just like in watercolor, where I'd let the water do its thing. Both cases, an example of releasing a little bit of control and allowing the flow to happen. He wanted to meet that day, none of this texting back and forth for days or weeks. I'd been working on tearing out old flooring on my staircase and thought I could use a break. And you know what? The funny thing is, it's been over 1.5 years, and while many other projects have happened around here, I haven't gotten back to finishing those stairs yet. We met for coffee at Tim Hortons and discovered people we knew in common and our mutual love for the canoe. It was something he'd gotten away from over the years because, well, life has a habit of doing that if we let it. When the conversation turned to the group of 7, I was shocked that he knew who they were, and even had a favorite of this famous group of Canadian painters, A.Y. Jackson. Mine was Lauren Harris. This shared love of the Canadian wilderness and the artists who, between the paddling and the portaging, strive to capture its beauty, was the initial spark for our own love story. Earlier that year, many months prior, I had booked an ambitious canoe trip to Killarney's Nellie Lake, which just so happened to be a favorite place of A.Y. Jackson's. So, less than a month into dating, Matt and I decided to tackle this backcountry trip, which I suppose is a really great way to test a new relationship. If you can work together out there, you can make it anywhere. So off we headed to my most favorite place.
Take the exit.
It's a trip that requires about 6 or so hours of driving to get to the park office at the George Lake Campground. Here we picked up our camping permit and then went into the town of Killarney for a lunch of fish and chips and, of course, checked out the Killarney Outfitters store. Then it was back in the Jeep for another 2+ hours of driving, heading towards the town of Espanola and the northern part of the park. Our destination, the unofficial access point of Walker Lake, where we planned on putting in the canoe. For some reason, the GPS took us on a little detour into the town of Sudbury, but we managed to get back on track without losing too much time. But then our travels came to a halt. We'd met a traffic jam. We were still about an hour from our put-in location, and we were told it would be another 12 hours before the road was cleared, since there'd been a really bad motor vehicle accident up ahead. The thing is, about these northern towns, there is only one road in. Our journey was at a standstill. We looked up what other campgrounds and provincial parks were nearby, and discovered Fairbank Provincial Park. After a quick call, we had our spot for the night. At that point, I was still bound and determined that we'd get to the Walker Lake put-in the morning. The next morning, we had a decision to make, and after much deliberation, we decided that making up an entire day's worth of lost time to get to our next reserved campsite would make an already challenging trip more than we were willing to tackle. I let the dream of getting to Nellie Lake go, for the time being. But luckily, due to this detour, this unexpected portage, if you will, we'd found ourselves in an absolute gem of a provincial park. They're really close.
Nova. Nova. Nova.
We're gonna leave it.
Yeah, she's really good.
Good girl. That's what I was waiting for.
Mm-hmm. Lie down. Down.
Good. There you go, Nova. That's a good girl. In the end, we didn't make it to Nellie Lake. We made it somewhere entirely different. And along the way, we learned that together we could handle the unexpected. Between the paddling and the portaging, there are ups and downs, peaks and valleys, challenges and accomplishments, just like life. On the portage trail, the wise words of Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood ring true. Often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else.